Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight, or this morning, depending on where you are, on which side of the world. I'm Irene Papadimitriou, Creative Director of Future Everything, and we are. If you don't know who we are, Future Everything is a non-profit arts organization and lab based in Manchester, and our work explores digital culture and the impact of technology in society. This event is part of our new program called Future Focus, which actually was launched during the lockdown back in May. And the reason about launching a new event, an online event during this time, was that came out of the need to continue critical conversations with our networks and beyond our networks, but also it was to think in particular societal challenges and our current world at a time of crisis, but also generally in wider crisis that we've been facing and we are still to face in the future. And also in this context to explore the role of art organizations and artists and culture have in these conversations. So today, the Money and Environment One event is part of a third series of the project, and in its turn is part of a wider season of events where we will be exploring environment, ecologies, and systems. And this series, Money and Environment, has been co-curated with Ismail Erturk, a senior lecturer at the University of Manchester Business School. And I'm going to pass in a minute to Ismail to say more about the objectives of this series and also today's session. But before I do that, I would like to welcome our amazing guest speakers. Ruth Catlow, artist, researcher, co-founder and artistic director of Furtherfield, an organization that I've been following for a very long time and have been influenced by. And also Ruth is the director of DECAL, Furtherfield's Decentralized Arts Lab. Also, we have Zach Zimmer, assistant professor of literature at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And last but definitely not least, Philip Rosner, economic historian and professor of early modern history at the University of Manchester. And I'm really sorry to say that tonight we were going to have Cassie Thornton with us, who is a brilliant individual, and I highly recommend to check her work from the Feminist Economics Department. But sadly, Cassie has been unwell, so she couldn't join us, but hopefully she can come back to join in one of the next series. So I'm going to share more about the brilliant speakers and also Ismail in the chat here, but also during the event and the conversation links and references that you can use and find later. And also talking about the chat, I would like to encourage you to use the chat actually at the bottom of the screen to introduce yourselves, but also share comments. And I know for me, it's still frustrating after so many Zoom calls and discussions. It's still frustrating to not be in the same room with people. So yeah, please feel free to share who you are in the chat, and also feel free to use the Q&A option again at the bottom of the screen throughout the session to post questions which we are going to address during the conversation. Yeah, without further ado, I would like to pass over to Ismail to say more about money and environment. Thank you, Ismail.
Thank you, Irene, and welcome everyone. It is an interesting experiment we are starting with Irene, bringing artists, academics, professionals, hopefully in future sessions as well, to talk about money and an environment. I'll start by talking about how I came to look at this topic from my research perspective. Now, I'll start by why I like working with artists. I think one of the idea is also, can we create different perspectives, creating new ways of knowing and acting on the environmental issues. This is a movie that I watched by accident. I mean, I know Wim Wenders, The Salt of the Earth. It's a documentary about the Brazilian social photographer, but also an economist, Sebastião Salgado. I'm sure you have seen this iconic picture of the gold mine in Brazil on the left. Now, what is the one interesting about this film was Salgado then went back to, when he retired, to Brazil. And what you see on the right-hand side in 2001, this is the landscape that his parents created by going into ranching and then making money. And then Salgado, working with engineers, regenerated the place by planting 2 million or 3 million. So I think this is the optimism about environment. I think we can regenerate. I think, but it's also, I mean, the power of artists working with social scientists and then scientists to be able to make a change. Now, I will first talk about two reversals: nature, money, money, nature. I didn't realize till I went to this museum in Edinburgh, Museum on the Bond, that my salary was basically salt. That's how Roman soldiers, some of their allowances were paid in salt. I think today we'll talk about how money creation is very much related to nature. But what seems to be happening, that's my research, money is now, there's a reversal, nature to money, creation of money now acting on nature to save the nature. I think that's the interesting question. Can money today, the financialized capitalism, can achieve this? So you see that moral money, a major topic in Financial Times, but then obviously the rhetoric and the narrative and the reality doesn't always match because we have suspicions and trust issues with the money. So bankers still work with profit motive. But then we have a technocratic intervention from the United Nations, which goes back to 1992. So there is something different about how finance is organizing itself to create a sustainable and green economy. And then this is Larry Fink. He writes this letter to the CEOs of all companies, big companies, every year. So now climate risk is investment risk. So I think that's where I find, in terms of research, interesting. I mean, if money managers use this kind of language and this kind of rationality, can we really trust them to deal with the more comprehensive issues of nature and finance? I think this series of events hopefully will give us some insights into that relationship between money and finance. And also we have now central bankers seeing climate risk as a source of financial risk as well. Now, this is not a small sort of or minor part of finance. These are not enthusiasts. As I said, they are managing $6 trillion like BlackRock, or the central banks, they do quantitative easing. But they also have micro financial innovation, finance presenting itself as a solution to environmental problem through financial innovation, which I take it with skepticism, but it just shows how it grows on various scales, and increasingly there's a dominant discourse. And this is Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So companies are supposed to be using standardized reporting, so ordinary people, investors can see. I think this again, the rationality, calculations, the motives are not very clear, but it is growing, starting from asset management, the central banks, the banks, to small boutique financial innovation, through investment banks, to the disclosure. And this is a beautiful picture from Stockholm School of Economics, Lina Selander and Oscar Mondianis, where a university, a business school, using its library and an education to remind their students that the environmental risk and social problems are with us. So I think as an academic who works in a business school, we increasingly are asked to be more activists. I think that's another thing that I would like to explore with the artists and other academics in this journey. How do we bring activism in universities, with activism on environment? And this is, again, I mean, it is important to look at, I think, the nature, the history. This is an interesting coin, silphium. This plant doesn't exist because it was over-extracted by the Romans. So the problem is not new. How do we learn from the history of money and an environment is an interesting question that we will explore today. And today's talk is going to focus on, but is not solely about what is the environmental cost of using money, especially at a time when we are increasingly using digital money, cryptocurrencies, and central banks as well are introducing digital money. This is when the Bank of England introduced polymer bank notes. As you can see on the right-hand side, it is environmentally better than the paper bank notes, but that's the kind of calculation. And this is how using Bitcoin consumes, how much energy it consumes. So it is almost 90% of the Czech Republic's energy consumption. So when I approached Irene, we said, why don't we organize these things? So let's look at the environmental cost of money, and then look at how money represents environmental damage, and how money is managed for sustainable and greener economy, and innovative money for ecological good, and then regulating money for climate change. Now, obviously, we will change this, add other things, and we'll start with the environmental cost of money today, but we'll touch on those other 4 topics too. So over to you, Irene.
Thank you, Ismail. Thank you for this really interesting introduction, and for setting the scene for this series. So as Ismail said, we will be exploring today a little bit these ideas around materiality of money and physical and to digital, and of course the production and links of money and links to environmental impact, but and in terms of planetary, but also human resources. But also we have, on the other hand, the idea of like how the stability of our current economic system is very much reliant on kind of ever-growing consumption, which of course in turn sustains the need for a growing economy and money supply. But of course, this growth is strongly linked to the use of limited natural resources as well. So it's like a twofold kind of issue as well. And there's a lot more that we're going to touch on. And I wonder, like moving on to our amazing guests today, I wonder if we can keep the same order that we mentioned with the introduction. So if we can go first with you, Ruth, and then Zach and Phil, is that okay?
It's unexpected, but it's fine. I thought we were going to go in the other direction. I thought we were going to go Phil, Zach, and me. We start with history, and then we.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's go with Phil. Sorry, you win. Actually, I know we did agree that before, so yeah, apologies.
Yeah, no, I'm easy, but there was a logic to it, I think.
There is. Yeah, you're right. Phil, is that okay with you? Shall we stick to the original idea? I apologize for this misunderstanding. Yeah.
Yeah, but absolutely. By all means, I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to try. And thanks very much, Irene and Ismail and all the others for inviting me, basically to comment on what occurred to me just when Ismail asked me to think about it, as really obvious. As somebody having worked on mainly 15th and 16th century Central European silver mining, and as many of you, some of you may be aware that the Central European mines, particularly Central German mines in Saxony, the Alps Mountains, accounted for up to 50 to 80% of European silver supply before the American silver from Potosi, which is nowadays in Bolivia, started coming in, really. And these regions really were at the heartlands of European industry. And silver, of course, was the main material for making money, because they moved away from a gold currency and abolished minting gold, and even started to mint the gold equivalent, the florin currencies, in silver. And then they're called thaler, because a lot of silver was found in the Czech mining city of Joachimsthal at the time, as it was called, and this is where the dollar comes from. And from the early times, people started getting to grips with what sort of cost this actually exerted on Mother Nature. On the left-hand side is an example from the 1490s, one of the earliest scientific treatises on mining, The Judgment of God, by somebody named Paul Snowbird. I don't know what the exact English translation is. It's a bird. And he writes something very interesting, which I kind of just briefly summarize. And he calls it God's judgment, Judicium Jovis, and it's Mother Earth represented by Mercury, who is her attorney, and she goes before God and accuses the miner, basically the miners, for having penetrated Mother Earth by digging deep into her wombs, tearing apart her entails, which is the iron ore that they were or the silver ore they were mining, and the earth covered with wounds and holes, which is invariably what you get if you do mining. The miner then replies, who's also called before the big court, and he replies, Mother Earth hides her treasures. Man needs to invest labor, capital, and skill, and go into extreme risks in order to extract what the gods would otherwise have left as gifts. So otherwise it would be no good for Mother Earth to herself if she wasn't exploited by that labor, capital, and kind of voracious destruction. Mercury then replies to the miner that he will leave the outcomes to Fortuna, which is the impersonated goddess of fortune. Man will need to do whatever they need to do, mining, obviously, doing all the industry, exploiting Mother Earth, but it will come at a grotesque cost. And that is confirmed by another work, which is almost contemporaneous, which you see on the right-hand side. This is more famous, Georg Agricola, who wrote the mid-16th century treatise on mining, which is one of the first systematic metallurgical, chemical, geobotanical treatises of the time, trying to systematically list all the occupations and tasks that go with mining. And in the first chapter, he actually spends an entire chapter justifying why miners do what they do, because obviously there's scope for actually defining that the miner is a good thing. And I quote, he says, the critics say further that mining is a perilous occupation to pursue, because the miners are sometimes killed by the pestilential air which they breathe. Sometimes their lungs rot away. Sometimes the men perish by being crushed in masses of rocks. Sometimes falling from the ladders into the shafts, they break their arms, legs, or necks. And it is added there that there's no compensation, which should be thought great enough to equalize the extreme dangers to safety in life. So once again, he tells essentially a negative story about mining, but on the other hand, justifies why it is totally necessary. And essentially he justifies because we need the silver, because we want to make capitalism work, basically. But it comes at a cost, it comes at a grotesque risk, and it comes at exploiting, subduing Mother Nature, classifying Mother Nature. This is what science really is about at the time, classifying, making sense of Mother Nature, and how this can be exploited to a profit maximizing extent. And we know that this is exactly what took place in 16th century Central Germany, especially in the mining towns and the area where Luther grew up in. This was one of the most advanced industrial areas where they used basically large liquation plants that are depicted in Agricola's work. These would be the equivalent of modern kind of high-tech factories, manufacturing businesses. They were consuming an awful lot of charcoal. They were consuming an awful lot of lead, because lead had to be imported from Poland as well as England in the process, because what they were doing with the argentiferous copper deposits that they found in that area. And they had to separate these ores into their components of pure silver and pure copper, which required a quite sophisticated metallurgical production sequence. And this we know from contemporary records how dirty this actually was in terms of the processes involved, the sediments, the evaporations of bad air, basically lead pollution, which also found its way into streams and brooks and waters. And you can trace it, and scholars have traced it, geologists, in the sediment records of the soil. So we can, with good conscience, say that this is one of the kind of archetypical examples of capitalism at its best or worst, depending on how you interpret it. But certainly at its most sophisticated in terms of the division of labor and the employment of capital, the sophistication of the production processes. It was totally based on wage labor, capital ownership, high financiers. A lot of the capital came from very far away, from Nuremberg, from Augsburg. These would have been the leading commercial and economic and financial cities of the age, where proverbially rich tycoons like James Jacob Fugger, the elder, the richest man who ever lived, as he has been recently called in a popular biography. And they were financing from these trades from a distance, and they were extracting the silver for their own means. They were shipping the silver across continental Europe down to Venice, as well as Lisbon and Portugal. And a lot of that silver would be used in the African and East Asian trades as well. So by all means, in terms of the capital concentration, the finance, the sophistication of the financial services that were related to financing the business, because these enterprises had to be pursued, the capital had to be brought up. And these were totally involving kind of big fish in the pond who were running the business with the aim of making a profit, of course, but also with the aim of extracting the material that would allow them to finance all the bigger trading links that would reach across the African coast into the Indian Ocean, and finally into the Chinese Sea as well. So we've got everything there that kind of makes it capitalism really by the book. And we find depictions in lots of contemporary works. This is one of my favorite ones. This is the altarpiece of the St. Anne's Church in Annaberg in Saxony, commissioned by the group of citizens of the town. And that had been a town that hadn't existed before the 1470s. It had literally sprung out of nothing. And within 20 years or so, reached population of about 20 to 25,000 people, which for that time in Saxony was a big city out of nothing. And lots of these cities mushroomed in the Alps mountains at the time and the surrounding area. And by the way, this is also the time and age that Martin Luther grew up in. And Luther experienced a lot of these processes firsthand, and he even became involved later on in his life, because you remember he was a lawyer, he was an administrator plus a theologian. So he had quite good knowledge of the economics of that, because all the economic knowledge at the time that you could pick up at university were by either studying for a divinity degree or for a law degree, which Luther had both done. And he would be regularly involved in the economics of it transferring some of these Zeigerhats, as they're called, liquation plants basically, into state ownership for the counts of Mansfield, which was the state where Luther spent the majority of his life in. He was often called for his expertise, and so on. And this, a lot of the Reformation age and the writings of the time do actually directly pick up these capitalistic, high capitalism at the time and these production processes. Lots of not only environmental degradation, which we can easily detect with modern mineralogical or metallurgical methods, but also numerous complaints, documents of the time, the peasant war of the 1520s, often picked up on the issue. The money was flowing out of, the money was clearly dirty, there's no question about that. I mean, the whole process was dirty. The money, the good money, was directly going out of Saxony, out of the Saxon land, directly into international trade. Not much of that silver actually remained in the place where it was mined or minted. And there were lots of complaints of the mining workers and the common people, so to speak, that they were often paid an underweight, debased small change currencies and pennies or bad groats and what have you. And the good money that they actually took out, and which was directly straight away minted into full-bodied silver thaler, silver dollars, high value currency, they never saw any of those. This contributed to a lot of popular unrest and peasant wars and what have you. So it was a voracious consumer of, and these are other contemporary depictions from Tyrol, which was another major mining area more to the south in the Austrian hereditary lands. It's the Schwarzer Bergbuch, which details once again a lot of the processes that happened in this mining region, and it tells you what a mountain would look like after a successive cycle. These silver mining cycles usually take about 10 to 20 years to run their full course and then decline, and then some other area will pick it up again, and so because there'll be resource depletion and exhaustion. And we have direct visual evidence on how this high concentration of merchant capital, global logistics, and global finance, really high finance, impacted directly on a natural environment and totally transformed it. And people were well aware of the potentially dangerous consequences, not only environmentally dangerous, dirty water, dirty meadows, what have you, but also the following the knock-on consequences in terms of social inequality generated by bad money staying in the region, good money leaving the region, and so on. And this is simply where I want to stop on. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of highlight a little bit and take the opportunity myself to explore more of the environmental issues, which hadn't really occurred to me before, which I simply picked up from my notes after Ishmael kindly pointed me towards it. And I'm going to stop now. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. So yeah, I'm not going to take any time. Just we will pass on to Zach next. Thank you, Zach.
Great. Thank you. And thank you very much, Phil. That was really wonderful. And it is going to flow right into what I'd like to talk about. I wrote a paper several years ago called Bitcoin and Potosi Silver, Historical Perspectives on Cryptocurrency, that I'll put a link to that paper in the chat when I'm not sharing my screen. And really what this paper is, so it's very specifically focused on Bitcoin, which I know is a little passé now, perhaps. There are other cryptocurrency regimes and a lot of interesting experimentation, which is actually very exciting. And that's why I'm so happy that Ruth is with us, and so sad that Cassie couldn't be with us too, because as I'll put out in these quick remarks, I think it's actually really important that artistic and aesthetic thought is at the forefront of thinking through these issues, because money itself at its heart is a profound metaphor that we use to tie together society. And I think the shift from the period that Phil was just talking about to to something new happened in connection to this mountain in what is now Bolivia called Potosi, which is the single greatest concentration of silver ever discovered on the planet. And it radically, fundamentally, and profoundly reshaped global economy, geopolitics, everything. And I think it's that moment, that shift, when something new emerged into the conceptual framework of a nascent global economy. I think that historical moment is the appropriate anchor to create a historical comparison with these new regimes of cryptocurrency. And so I'm going to, this is outlined in the paper, but I'm going to go through this rather quickly, that I think any currency regime is based on assumptions about the economy itself, sociality, labor, and exchange. And I think we can do a point-to-point comparison between what happens with Potosi and the early version of cryptocurrency. There were things that preceded Bitcoin. I'm sure that people know much more about this than me in the audience, but and obviously there are new cutting edge experiments with cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. But so I'm very much focused on Bitcoin as a moment. And so those assumptions connect to themes of extraction, inflation, ecology, and work. So those are the 4 areas that I focus on in the paper. I'm going to go through them very quickly so we can hear from Ruth and have time for discussion, because basically the whole point of the paper is that we need to really take seriously the metaphors that get hard-coded into a cryptocurrency regime. And the first error is the gold standard. And so as Phil mentioned, even before this moment of Potosi, silver had become much more important in the nascent global economy. And by the late 16th century, it is the global economy. So it's always been very strange to me that the Bitcoin white paper focused so intensely on gold standard, and these concepts, when really any actual historical understanding of the global economy would have looked to silver. So here is a photo, a map of where Potosi is, and a 16th century woodcut of the mountain. And I'm just going to check my notes. So Potosi accounted for a plurality of the 16th century New World silver, and that New World silver made up 3/4 of the global supply in the 16th century. So as you can see, this profoundly changed the global economy. And this was the coin of the realm, as they say, the Real de a Ocho, or the Spanish piece of 8. This is an example from the 1610s. And so this silver strike in Potosi represented a discovery of new resources of unprecedented value, but it was only with the technological development, mercury amalgamation, that the imperial scale exploitation of that resource became possible. So I like the connection between a new thing, Potosi, that's actually not new, right? It was just new for the Spanish Empire and the colonial apparatus that followed it, that realized that there was silver in there. But then they also needed a new technological process to extract. And so in the paper, I make a comparison between the extraction using this silver amalgamation process and the shift from home mining rigs in Bitcoin to the large-scale cryptocurrency farms. And obviously, the mercury amalgamation itself is probably the single most concentrated cause of the environmental devastation that wrecked both the Potosi area, but also Huancavelica in Peru, where the mercury deposits were and the cinnabar deposits. And
Zach,
yes?
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. If you are moving your slides, if you're advancing them, we can't see them. We just see the first slide, your title slide.
Oh no.
So if it might be better if you press the present option, and then you can move them with the cursor from there.
Yeah, let's see.
Oh.
Do you see this now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is what I was referring to in the shift of technologies. This is a waira, which means air or wind in the Quechua dialect that they're speaking around Potosi. And so it's a home smelting rig, basically. And this was what was used in the initial extraction, but then within a short period, a new viceroy, Toledo, arrived, appointed by the Spanish Empire, and he's been called the bureaucratic Pizarro, right? So Pizarro is known for conquering Atahualpa and the Incan Empire. And then this second wave of Spanish colonialism comes, the bureaucratic wave, the papeleo, or the avalanche of paperwork. And he implements this shift from this individual rig mining process to this patio amalgamation process, or the beneficio de patio, that uses mercury amalgamation and large-scale industrial setting to extract the silver. And at one point in, I'm not sure if it was in, so he arrives in 1580, and I think within a decade or two, the single largest concentration of mill technology to crush the ore is located in Bolivia. So on the entire planet, the single greatest concentration of silver, the single greatest concentration of mill technology and grinding technology. This is all in what was essentially an imperial backwater up until that point. And this happens in less than a generation. Okay, so I think that is the kind of changing of the entire horizon of economic possibility that happens with this pairing of technology and resource. But of course, this leads to incredible environmental destruction. Even to this day, the adobe bricks in Huancavelica that make up the houses there have detectable traces of mercury in the walls. So you can imagine 400 years of mercury exposure have long-term devastating effects on population. So this is this working now? You can see, okay. So this is this silver patio process. And so I liken this to the shift from the kind of wildcat mining rig to these huge industrial scale cryptocurrency mining rigs. And the important thing to remember here is that mining as a technology always leads to consolidation and exhaustion. It's part of the cycle that Phil was talking to us. So there's always a process of consolidation in mining, okay? So when mining becomes the underlying metaphor for the concept of cryptocurrency itself, it is hard-coded to tend towards consolidation and concentration. So that's one of the most important metaphors that I take out, or one of the most important consequences from these metaphorical connections that I take out. So this is what the Cerro Rico de Potosi looks like now. You can see that this is an area that has been environmentally devastated. All of the trees were cut down to feed the mills, and it's just been sprawl and environmental pillaging since then. Let's see. There was one more thing I wanted to show you. Let me see if I can find it in my notes. So what I want to take from this is that instead of proclaiming the digital process of cryptocurrency to be truly and constitutively decentralized, which was a lot of the rhetoric in the early moment of Bitcoin, we must remember that mining is always an act of terraforming, of remaking the earth itself on a geological scale. And so in this, if we're thinking at this level, at a planetary scale of remaking the earth, that's the level at which we should engage in blockchain technology. And so I think blockchain technology itself is terraforming the digital financial realm, and I don't think it's decentralizing it. And I think that's really proven out even more since I published this piece. So, yeah, well, let me leave it at that and just show you that this is the scale of mining technology right now. You can see these very, very tiny human beings right here. And I think that these machines and what they're doing to the planet have a direct and metaphorical link to the cryptocurrency regimes that we're developing. And so this is why we need to rethink the metaphors that we've hard-coded into these systems and consider from the outset both the social aspect. So instead of trying to fix the problem of trust through algorithms, to actually confront the social network of currency and the social role that money plays in maintaining human relations, the environmental costs of extractivist technologies, and the consolidating nature of mining or a digital currency that's fundamentally based on a mining metaphor. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Zach. So yeah, it's a great time to bring in Ruth into this and explore some kind of like different narratives, like different perspectives as well, and also hopefully it will give us enough time to have conversation. And please feel free to like our attendees, please feel free to post questions in the Q&A or chat box. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth, you're muted.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here. And I think it's relevant for me to say that when Irini invited me to be on this panel, I kind of wanted to say no, because it's a very frightening topic. And there's so much at stake here. It's so huge. And to think that we can address the things that need addressing in the time that we have is just a little overwhelming. We're asking a lot of this kind of conversation to touch on all of these things in a responsible way. So brilliant kind of segue though, very nice curation. Thank you, Irini. So Furtherfield's been working in the blockchain space kind of seriously as kind of in investigating this space since 2015. And we've been looking at this space because it provides an excellent medium and context to think critically about the relationship of art, value, and money. And then the consequences of those relations for society. And as an organization that had kind of grown up with the web and understanding the web as a space that we make ourselves in order to create the relations that we want to, in order to collaborate in the way that we want as artists, techies and activists, we had a kind of collective practice for exploring, testing, kind of shaking the medium to see what it would do and to see what it might mean. We opened the Decentralized Arts Lab last year, and this is to support R&D by artists who are interested in using, testing and critiquing blockchain and Web3 technologies, kind of aiming for fairer, more dynamic and connected cultural ecologies and economies. So we have a whole program of workshops, commissions and writing around this topic. I'm going to do a couple of like building blocks. So we can think of the web as the internet of messages. We can then think of blockchain as the underpinning technology for the internet of money and digital assets. And Bitcoin, like the first blockchain software, is money mined and secured by a distributed network of computers. The money is mined in a competitive process to solve hard maths problems and secured using cryptography. And I agree with everything that Zach was saying before about the rhetoric proposing that we're now talking about decentralized distribution of money and control, and actually we're just seeing a decentralization by different people. That kind of requires quite a lot of unpacking, and we don't have time for it. Ethereum's the second wave blockchain software, and this creates programmable money. So this means that we can attach conditions to our distributed network of money. And this is enabling new approaches to governance. And this is the bit that I personally and a lot of the people that we're working with are especially interested in. And this is for organizations that it enables us to test and template new forms of trans-local organization for commons and cooperative organization. And this is the bit that's really interesting to us. I did gather some arguments on both. I gathered some arguments together about the kind of environmental impact of Bitcoin, and I'm going to try and leave enough time to make sure that we have time to talk about this, because it's really important. It comes up, and it should come up. It's a really important question, but it's really, it deserves argument, a full argument about what's going on there. But mainly what I want to do is to show a couple of artworks and talk about an organization that used blockchain technology to talk about and draw out the relationships between energy, environment, financial technologies, and mining. So I'm going to show the first work. This is Harvest by Julian Oliver. So what we're looking at here is a mining rig that mines Zcash, which is a early, very private, privacy-focused cryptocurrency, uses wind energy to fund climate research. So this was made in 2017, and it was speaking directly, I think, to the kind of sense of alarm about the energy that was used by mining rigs. So this is in some ways a closed system. It's a rhetorical device. It's an artwork that is a rhetorical device to provoke a conversation, and it's making money to fund climate research. The second work I wanted to show you was Click Mine by Sarah Friend. So this is a work that Furtherfield commissioned in collaboration with Neon Festival, also in 2017. The original version requires cryptocurrency to play, but you play it with Ether, actually, but she's created a free version because she's showing it as part of the peer-to-peer UK Hong Kong exhibition at the moment, and ETH gas prices have gone crazy for all kinds of reasons that we don't need to know about now. But so this is a kind of free-to-play version, and I'm just going to give you a demo. Would we like to play? Yes, we would. So this is a click game. So I'm going to read it to you because it'll allow me to be more precise. I find this, what I really like about this work is that I think it's a dark satire on the democratization of mining and all the rhetoric that surrounds it. So it's a clicker game based on the blockchain. With each click, you can mine a virtual plot of land. Each click mints a new cryptocurrency coin on the Ethereum network, as well as allowing the player to build new power-ups. As wealth is created, it's also destroyed. So you accumulate these click tokens, but you're spending ETH. the artist says it's a critical look at the tumultuous hyperinflationary financial landscapes of cryptocurrencies. It also speculates on the historicity of currencies. We can tell much about an ancient culture from excavating coins and other tokens of assigned value. How then will historians of future excavate cryptocurrencies, and what conclusions will they draw about the way we generate and define value? So I'm just going to play for a few seconds. So here, what this game's doing, it's allowing us, I've just made 10 clicks, which allows me to buy a shovel. Oops. I'm going to buy a shovel. And now I can mine more effectively. So this is kind of reminiscent of the grotesque machinery that Zach just showed us. We have to build our mining efficiency. Our mining efficiency also helps us to build our speed. Here our speed is. And now I have 45 clicks, so I can buy a pan. And this allows me to start to mine with even greater speed and efficiency. I now have 150. I can afford a sluice. Let's do this. Okay, we can see, here we go, mining. If I try and click too fast, it sets me a limit on how quickly I can do it. And you can see in the transaction history here. So this game is registering every click within the game on the Ethereum blockchain when it's working on the Ethereum blockchain. So we know that a lot of people have been playing this game, which is a little bit crazy. Yes, we would like to buy a spiral panner. I kind of want to take you to or to at least allow you to look into the black hole that we are creating with this game. So basically, if you play this for another 4 or 5 minutes, you end up looking into the void, basically. So here we are accumulating the tools, accumulating capital, mining ever faster, earning our click tokens, but we're clicking on a black void, and this is its message. I'm going to finish up just by pointing you in the direction of the Disco Co-op. This, I find, one of the most hopeful, optimistic, and kind of brilliant projects in the space. It's a peer-to-peer commons cooperative and feminist economic alternative to decentralized autonomous organizations on the blockchain. I really urge you to look at their approach to organizing in a way that accounts for care. So it's inspired by feminist economics and by Eleanor Ostrom's kind of impulse and research, which shows that economies need to follow the needs and interests of communities and their ways of life rather than the other way around, which is unfortunately what happens a lot. And I'm going to finish up by just saying that, so we have faced a lot of anxiety, I think legitimate anxiety and concern that we're putting all of our energy into a space that is highly capitalistic and essentially kind of involved in a lot of the culture of everything that's wrong and everything that's actually destroying the planet. But I think our position is that it's really important for artists to be working critically in this space, and we can't afford to abandon such a powerful global tech to financiers and engineers, because then we abandon this technology to the logic of financiers and engineers. And these are technologies that are going to shape our lives and environment. So we really need to diversify the people, the cultures, the rhetorics, the metaphors that shape them. And I see Disco Co-op as a really great example, a kind of concrete example of people who are doing that.
Thank you, Ruth. That's brilliant, and yeah, I agree. As you say, we do need to have these different kind of imaginaries of future alternative kind of visions as well. And this is where I feel that artists are really important, and people that you've been working with and the examples that you shared are excellent. And I'm going to also put in the chat like a couple of links from Cassie as well. Although she's not with us, I would urge you to check her work. So I think, Ismail, you had a question to start with, right? And we can, yeah, if anyone has any comments or questions, including Phil and Zach and Ruth, please, yeah, just feel free to jump in.
Well, it's excellent presentations. I think it brought many things together about the environment, money, and then capitalism. And then looking at from today, I think one of the things that I like is activism. But my question would be, I mean, beliefs and language, and then capitalism. We talk about rhetoric, historical sort of understanding of, Luther reference by Phil was very interesting. So my question to you would be then, I mean, how do we sort of reimagine a language and belief for environmental activism today when it comes to money's relation with environment? A big question, but provocation.
I can give that just because it's still fresh in my mind. This is why I was pointing to the disco co-op. Is I think that if we start with money, we're screwed. We have to start with what relationships of care and what diverse relationships of care look like, and then make money serve that. I can see Annie's asking, what is Disco Co-op exactly doing? The Disco Co-op is a workers' co-op that is accounting for the care work that happens both within and between a set of workers, as well as the productive, profitable work that gets done. And they're building accounting systems and care cultures that sit alongside each other and inform each other and are constantly evolving. There's a manifesto on the site which is really worth looking at, but it's this kind of this idea, I think, of Ostrom. The idea of the commons is really core. Is this idea that communities that are affected by the communities that use, generate, and need resources are also the people to govern them and decide how they should be managed between them. Yeah, so care is accounted for instead of externalized, which is what all capitalist extractivist systems do.
That, and if I could jump in, Ruth, thank you. And so bringing care in as a counterbalance to extraction, I think something similar can happen with scarcity. And I mean, the thing about Bitcoin is that it put a hard cap on currency, and that was the thing that made it so compelling to a lot of people, the digital gold bugs. And I think that is just profoundly mistaken. And because of that cap, then you get to the problems of the proof of work versus proof of stake and all of these very technical things that actually, before you can even deal with those problems, you need to figure out what it is you're exactly trying to build. And that's why these works that Ruth is pointing us to are so important for everyone to spend time with, to actually get to that deep level about what are we talking about? What is it that we want money to do? If we're going to reinvent money and we're going to port money onto a digital system in a way that's different from the check clearinghouse and credit cards and things like this, you know, we need to think about it in terms of care, in terms of sustainability, not in terms of extraction, hard limits, and scarcity.
Sorry, I'm just, we had, Rodrigo had a question about Zach's paper link, so I've just put it in the chat. And yeah, thank you so much for your...
I think Bill has something to say, really?
No, just directly picking up what Ruth and Zach were mentioning. Metaphor, of course, in language is fundamentally important in economics as well. The way we talk about money, we talk about economy, fundamentally determines how money will work and how the economy will work. I mean, this is a very basic truism, and just thinking about that we still refer to, even if it's Bitcoin, any cryptocurrency, to the physical act of mining, which was dangerous, which physical work, hard work, connected with all sorts of other dangerous implications. But this is of course not how Bitcoins are made, apart from the energy consumption. But we're still using the same metaphors 500 years ago, thousands of years ago, since money was invented. And on the other hand, something interesting in the reverse, we also know from Martin Luther, who he translated the Bible into the vernacular German of his time, and apparently he did use a lot of mining metaphors when he translated. Some of the stuff he translated from the classical Greek very freely, and he would use mining metaphors. So he directly pick up on processes that with quite specialized terminology that the way he was socialized and he had grown up in that area would have given him. So that's also quite interesting, the cultural and linguistic connections. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've got another open question. So Alexia says that part of what is striking in Zach's discussion of Bitcoin is about the cryptocurrencies need for a rhetoric. Actually, I'm going to put it live so that hopefully you can see it. And reality of scarcity in rooting money's value, which has a relation to the sense of finitude and scarcity that also undergirds some of our discussions of environmental protection and conservation. She's asking if there is a danger in shifting to metaphors of abundance and losing that finitude for environmental sustainability. So Zach, I don't know if you want to.
Well, it's a very good point, and but I wouldn't say danger in itself so much as a trade-off. I mean, I would say that we're living in the danger of the other side. But perhaps Ruth might want to speak to this.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting question, because we lived through the first 20 years of the web with this sense of total abundance, like especially in the circles that I moved in, there was so little talk of the cost of infrastructure. So many people were, there's a really great quote from Shuli Chang, who said, it's as though we thought we could exist off ether. You know, like artists stopped thinking about having to make a living. We were all kind of patching together other lives, and then somehow having this kind of flowering of creativity online, but that had no kind of financial economy to it. And there has been something that I can't quite get to the heart of, but I think that there is really something about the scarcity in the blockchain, which I think is quite useful, because it demands that we think about the cost of maintaining infrastructure, which is what I think we need to be thinking about in relation to the environment as well. We need to think of whole systems and what the economy of a whole system is. But it always comes down to where you set the frame, and if care is in that frame. Yeah.
I don't know.
As we're seeing in the pandemic, care itself is a scarce resource.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is it is an important point that Alexia brings up. But I think that discussing it openly is very different from just taking baseline assumptions about the gold standard. Especially because here in the US, we almost had someone appointed to our regulatory body who was openly encouraging a return to the gold standard. And so there's kind of this full circle where the madness of the kind of digital gold bug rhetoric is now entered into the monetary system itself. Yeah, I think these are things to take into account and consideration, and generally listen to people who have these broader global understandings and are honest and open about their intentions and starting points. That's why I think artists can help us with the experimentation.
There is another, I know we're running out of time, but there's another, maybe we're going to get to this last question, that, which is really interesting. R8 is asking in the chat, thinking about the mining game and making the player wants to get rewards, again, as a metaphor and the point of by Zach of reinventing money and the future. So they are asking if a system of care can be a new reward system, and what might this relationship look like? Ruth, do you want to go?
Yeah. This is where it's such a shame that we don't have Cassie here, because her work at the Feminist Economics Department, specifically, actually we're working with her on the Hologram, which is a peer-to-peer feminist healthcare system. And again, her and Disco together, what I really like about these projects is that they're not the idea of an incentive mechanism, which is right at the heart of all the kind of cryptocurrency technologies, are really kind of refused. This idea that you get rewarded with something else for the care that you give is really problematic. But it requires really careful work and feeling and testing and experimenting with these things. It's a really good question. Like there was a whole load of work around whether we could do away with currency entirely and just move to a reputation system, for instance. But the minute you start looking at incentivizing reputation, suddenly things can get really dark really quickly. And I think the same is the case when we start accounting for care in, like, we have to be very careful about how we do that.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree. I think Cassie would have been amazing to input here. I did include the links of her work, the also hologram, and and her feminist department as well in the chat. I know we're running out of time, and I just wanted to thank you all so much for your amazing contributions. And as you said, Ruth, just to reiterate, is definitely this is such a complex subject, and we can't cover. The intention was never to cover everything today. So this is why with Ismail we will have a series of conversations here, and hopefully this was like a starting point to kind of help us to build on the future kind of sessions. So please keep an eye on our website for more information. We will be also putting the video from today, the streaming online on the website, so feel free to watch it. Again, it's on the Future Everything website and Future Focus page. Ruth, Phil, Zach, Ismail, thank you so much for all your brilliant work and for being here. Huge thanks to our amazing attendees as well, and it's great to see everybody's kind of introductions and comments. And also big thanks to my colleague Chris for making all this happen and being hidden in the back end, to making sure that we're running okay. So yeah, have a great evening, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you at the next event. Thank you.